Pakal, first among equals. I only see it really seeing play with this one playing card that generates a might artifact creature. Ancestral Reminiscence is 4 mana, draw 3, discard a card. This is not a bad card, especially considering that there is new cards that lower the cost of flash and sorceries. Brackish Blunder, 2 mana. Brackish Blunder I think is a bad card. Well, I don't truly understand the map, so I do think it's a bad card. Yeah, Braided Knight I think is going to be a super prevalent card because it can tap non-land permanents. During your opponent's turn, if they're going to do something, monster effect, summon a monster attack, you just say no. You can only do it 3 times, but it's a quick effect and it kind of stays on the field. It's like, if you know a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh, it's kind of like Swords of Revealing Light. Magic the Gathering currently does not have a Swords of Revealing Light that just stops your opponent from attacking because the battle phase is a turn in itself. I call it like a half a turn. Charting the Course makes me feel like 1 mana attackers are pretty good in the game right now because this is essentially just a draw 2 for 2 mana. That is not a bad effect. You can discard if you want to, if you choose not to attack, but generally you go pretty plus. The only downside I would say is it's not an instant. Cogwork Wrestler is a potentially 3/2 flash for 1 water. Confounding Riddle is the card that every water deck is going to be wanting to play, and it's a common, of course, because all the good cards are common. It's 3 mana, which is costly, but it's a negate. Cool. Or it's add 1 card to your hand, but you mill 3 to your graveyard. Water decks would want that effect because the most powerful water decks currently in the meta are ones that require you to have sorceries and instants in your graveyard. This fulfills that cost while giving you the option of a negate. One of the best water cards to be released, honestly. So the way I believe Council of Echoes works is that for 6 mana, when it enters the battlefield, you can return a target non-land permanent from your graveyard to your hand. It's bad. Deeproot Pilgrimage is Murloc support. It's not bad support. It's just I don't know much about Murloc. Fidic Echo is flying as long as there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard. It's a bad card, in my opinion. I wouldn't even run it in draft either. Eaten by Piranhas is a flash removal. Trailed Cave Worm gets 2 attack as long as there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard. That's trash. I'm not even gonna look at that anymore. That card's garbage. That is something I'd rip up if I pulled it. Hermetic Nautilus, in my opinion, is not a good standalone monster. I feel like it's only good support if you have another monster which you need to get an attack in. This can prove to be a committable foe to your opponent, being able to go in for 4 damage, or just potentially just wasting an opponent's block since it has 4 defense, and generally monsters in the early to mid range have 3 attack. Roll into History is too expensive. Is it really worth it? Not really. If it was 1 less mana, it would be worth it because you would get a mana advantage, but you're kind of breaking even with this card. It's not super good, but it's not super bad either. It just negates a monster. That's pretty much all it does. Inverted Iceberg, 2 mana. Enters the battlefield, you mill a card, draw a card, which is nice. It gets like cards in your resource, in your graveyard, in your hand. And you could also transform it into a monster for 6 mana. It's a 6/6. But it's not like impressive. It doesn't do much. Probably won't see any play. But it is interesting because milling and drawing a card, maybe if you played this for 1 mana, would be really good. Goodsail's Larcenist is a flying ward 2/3. It's pretty strong. If it enters the battlefield and it's the only monster you control, I believe you can just turn your opponent's monster into like a mana token thing. So Lodestone Needle is a flash, put 2 stuns on an opponent monster, but for 3 mana, you can have a artifact where it's just pay 1 mana and potentially just draw a card or get a counter. That's good. That's a good card, a very good card, especially considering it's flash. There's a lot of power creep in this set. So Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel for 2 mana is good, but I'm not entirely sure how it works. It states right here that it deals combat damage to a player, you put a course counter on it, period. So is drawing a card then discarding a card which comes after a separate effect, or is that happened after you fulfill the cost to deal damage? I'm not entirely sure, but if it is a separate effect, just summoning this as a flash and then using it on your opponent's turn to draw a card and discard a card, and then you can do it again on your turn, like every turn, is pretty good. A little too good actually. It's one of the best blue cards I've seen in a while. Marauding Brine Fang for 7 mana, Ward 3, and Island Cycling. No. Easy no. Well, Murder Cave Diver is for 3 mana, a 2/4 that can get really big and cannot be blocked. Oaken Siren for 2 mana is good. It can be tapped for mana, and it's a viable monster. It's also an artifact creature, which I think works well with the artifact archetype. Oju Pakapik Deepest Epoch. I hope I pronounced that right. It's a god card. It's cool. You can cast instance twice, once on your turn, and then again on your opponent's turn, the same spell for no mana cost. Also, when it dies, it becomes a land, and then that land can just become the monster back. The stats are good. It's flying. It's... I think it's... We're entering water meta. Puzzle Door is pretty bad. Yeah, it's just pretty bad. Out of Air is essentially for 4 mana you can negate any spell, or for 2 mana you can negate specifically a creature spell. It's a bad card, but in draft it'll probably be used. Pirate Hat. Equipped creature gets 1/1 and has whenever this creature attacks, draw a card and discard a card. Yeah, it's decent in draft, not outside of draft. I think all the spells and stuff for water are going to be terrible, but the monsters are probably going to be better. Relic's Roar. Until the end of the turn, target artifact or creature becomes a dinosaur artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/3 in addition to its other types. Yeah, it's pretty bad. River Herald Scout, 2 mana. When this card enters the battlefield, it explores. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad too. Sage of Days, 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put one of them. This card sucks. Yo, that card. Sage of Days is garbage. That card's trash. Self-Reflection, 6 mana. Create a token that's a copy of a target creature you control. Look at that. Flashback is actually cheaper than the spell cost, so you want this card in your grave. Shipwreck Sentry seems like one of the best draft blue cards you can get, besides the god cards. Very decent statted monster. Yeah, Cynthia's Benisar has to do with caves. It's 6 mana. I don't know what caves do, so I'm going to skip over it. So Song of Stupefaction is essentially a mill 2, but if you use it on an opponent's monster, you can make their monster like have low attack. Not really removal, but it does remove the battle phase for that specific monster, which is a decent-ish effect for the mill 2. I wouldn't use it in modern day standard, but in draft it'll be useful to facilitate your strategies. Spyglass Siren's pretty bad. You do get a map which could explore you and potentially get you a card, but nah, I'm not really feeling it. Staunch Crewmate. That's a surge. Yeah, so I think in Yu-Gi-Oh! There are some of these cards. I don't know if Magic the Gathering has a lot of them. I don't think they do. But these are cool effects. They're fun effects. Subterranean Schooner is for 2 mana, a 3/4 crew 1. The best part is that it's a potentially a draw or a counter on the monster that crewed it. So you start ramping up ASAP. The Enigma Jewel makes my brain hurt. It is a ramper. You can get your like mana even quicker, and then it has like a 9 effect that's game ending. Essentially, you exile cards, you bring out this for 9 mana, and then you can play each of those cards that are exiled. But there's another ability. Whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mounted ability, you can copy it and choose new targets. It generates so much advantage, but the best part is that it's just like good. It's not a bad card, and the blast effect isn't bad, so it's just bonus. But I think it's only good in strategies where you have activated abilities early. Specifically, Azorius Soldiers. I think this is going to be an excellent card in that deck. Everflowing Well is essentially just for 3 mana you draw 2 cards, you mill 2 cards. But it also has the potential to be a mana. So a draw 2 that can beat a mana in late game isn't the worst thing in the world. I can see why it's a rare. Ishana's Tiebinder for 3 mana is a flash creature that's 3/2 that can negate a activated or triggered ability. I don't understand this card truly to know what it's negating, but I mean, if it's a flash negate that's also a built-in monster, that's pretty decent. Unlucky draw for 4 mana is it's bad. Waterlogged Hulk is interesting, and it's a card I am gonna be trying in my water decks going into the future. Yeah, it doesn't get you a card you just mill, but still getting a card in your graveyard can be pretty useful, and especially since at 4 mana you can just take an island that's in your graveyard from all the milling and turn it into a monster. And it's not a bad monster, it has vigilance, and it can't be blocked. Waterwind Scout's not the best in my opinion. Waylaying Pirates isn't really that good either. You stun an opponent's monster and you get a 3/3 for 4 mana. So Zodaglyph is going to be the last card, and it's not impressive. Turning one of your monsters into a 5/4 isn't nothing to write home about. And Discover 3, I'm not entirely sure what Discover 3 means, but if it doesn't mean draw 3, then it's not worth it. But yeah, that's going to be it for now. I'm going to be doing black in the next video because this video is pretty long. Regardless, I love doing this, and I do appreciate you watching me, and I do hope that you have a great rest of your day or night, and I hope things are going well for you. Honestly, I wish you the best. Maybe I'll catch you next time. My name is KushiKush, and that's it. Later.